Now let's talk about fresh herbs. So when I'm referred to fresh herbs, I'm talking about things like parsley, cilantro, basil, rosemary, thyme, sage, all those delicious, fragrant herbs that make food so yummy. Well, now when it comes to fresh herbs, the trick is to treat them like a bouquet of flowers. You know, when you bring home a beautiful bouquet of flowers, you usually cut off the ends a little to bring life to the stems, and then you put them in some fresh water. Well, we're going to treat our herbs the exact same way. Now, the great thing about this storage trick is when you treat your herbs like a fresh bouquet of flowers, they're going to last you not just a week, but a couple of weeks. That means that you'll be able to use these fresh herbs in multiple meals while you cook. Okay, so let's get started. What I'm going to need is a container just like this. I actually have multiple containers. I have these Weck jars that I love for food storage. I also have a leftover just tomato jar from some canned glass tomatoes. I have a little tomato paste jar. I mean, get creative. You don't have to buy jars. Use what you have. But I definitely recommend using glass jars. And then I'm just going to fill these jars with water, just like you would when storing flowers. Just enough. You don't want to saturate the leaves. You just want to have enough so that the stems can soak up that water. So that's going to keep your herbs fresh. So next, I'm going to start with my herbs. Now today, what I picked up at the market this week was some beautiful fresh parsley, which I love to add to salads, and I'll add to soup, and I'll make broth with. I also love to throw this on top of like spaghetti. It adds a very unique flavor as a topping. I also have some cilantro. I'm a huge fan of cilantro. I know it's a love or hate thing, but of course like Mexican nights, slaws, things like that. And I have some delicious fresh basil, which I actually have more of, and I'm planning to make some pesto with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the ends here. These ends actually aren't so bad, so I probably don't need to clip them. Sometimes you can see the ends and they're browning on the end, then they definitely need to be clipped. I'm just going to kind of clip them off just to bring, not much, just to bring some fresh life to these herbs, to keep, open up the stems just like you would flowers. My mother-in-law is actually a florist, and this is what she taught me on how to store my flowers to keep them fresh. And actually this jar is a little too small. Let's use this jar. I'm just going to put them in the water in my jar. You can see, let me turn that around. You can see right there, I didn't fill up the water enough to like cover the leaves up here. I don't want to do that, just like with a bouquet of flowers. Instead, I just want to provide enough water just so the stems can drink that up. So I'm going to now put that off to the side, and I'm going to continue on with my cilantro, my favorite herb of all time. I'm going to pull off this. Just chop off some of the browning ends. I don't want to get too much. Okay, I'm going to use this bigger jar for this. Just put those in. You can see, look how beautiful those look. I mean, every time you open up your fridge, it's like opening up to a bouquet of flowers or fresh herbs just growing in your refrigerator. Now for the basil, I'm going to do the exact same thing. You can kind of see that they're browning on the end, so I just want to open those up. So soak up the water. Okay, this I probably am going to have to add a little bit more just because these have already been cut so far down. And I probably have to add a little bit more water. Oh, definitely. Let me fill up my jar so that those stems can reach the water. Ah, perfection. Aha, okay. So now that we have stored our herbs in the fresh water, just like a bouquet of flowers, now we can store them in the fridge. But before we do that, I'm going to put the basil aside because that's the one exception. All of these herbs, I'm actually going to cover with a plastic bag. Now, if you want to use a reusable bag, like a stasher bag, you're more than welcome to do that. I actually reuse these plastic bags for my herbs because I'm always buying fresh herbs. So as I finish up like the parsley, and then when I buy new parsley, I'll use the exact same bag. I mean, they don't really get dirty or anything, and you can always wash them out and dry them if you need to. So for more delicate herbs like parsley and cilantro, I like to cover them with a plastic bag and then secure that plastic bag with a rubber band. Now this is going to keep them from getting limp in the fridge and, falling over. Now for hardier herbs like rosemary and thyme that are more woodsy herbs, they have a very thick stem, you do not need to do this. You can just leave them, open. They don't need a plastic bag covering them because they are not going to wilt and get limp like these softer herbs like parsley and cilantro. Mint usually does well uncovered as well, but if you're finding that the mint is starting to get limp, you might want to put a plastic bag over it. So let me put a plastic bag over the cilantro. Yeah. Okay. Now my fresh herbs are ready to be put in the fridge. Now the reason why I said basil is the exception is because basil doesn't like cold temperatures, which means the fridge is a no-no for basil. Basil actually doesn't grow in the winter time when some of these other herbs may grow, or the fall time if it doesn't snow in your area, I guess, during the winter. But basil does not like those cold temps. And so if you put this in the fridge, it's going to get dark spots and go bad very quickly. So I actually like to just display my basil just over on the sink, and that's where I'll put my basil and just clip away at the leaves as I need them. Now when you need your fresh herbs, you can just remove the bag if they have a bag over the top, and then just take some scissors, some kitchen scissors, and just clip away as much as you need, and then you can cut them up or whatever you're going to do with those herbs. Or if you don't want to be fancy, you could just use your hands and tear off some of your herbs. Now when you're finished and you have some of these stems left over, you can save these stems, put them in a bag, put them in your freezer, and you can use these to make like chicken broth, vegetable broth, beef broth. They add a ton of flavor. So even the stems, after you use the leaves, are still worthwhile to use. Okay, well, that is the trick to using fresh herbs, is to store them like a bouquet of beautiful flowers, and for lighter herbs, like parsley and cilantro, to put a bag over the top before storing in the fridge. And remember, basil is the one exception. It doesn't like cold temperatures, so leave that out just like a beautiful bouquet of flowers. So a quick tip, green onions can actually be stored just like the fresh herbs. That's my preferred method. And when you store green onions like a bouquet of flowers, they'll last you at least a couple of weeks. So let me show you real quick how to do this. So I have my green onions here. I mean, look at these. They're giant from the market this weekend. So most green onions you find in the store are not going to be this tall, but if you happen to be at a farmer's market and pick up some green onions, I like to just cut off the tops up here, this part, so that they're not falling over. And I'll actually add these to a bag in my freezer to make broth and stock with, to make veggie broth, to make chicken broth. I have a bag in my freezer where I keep scraps like this. I can put kale stems in there. I can take the stems from herbs after I use them. I can use the tops of this. I put all those in there, and then when I need veggies to make broth, I can just grab out what I need. Just a quick extra tip there. So I'm going to cut off this. Now, that's looking a little limp. Okay, now my green onions are ready. I'm going to do the exact same thing as before. I'm going to take a jar. This is a leftover pasta sauce jar, so use what you have. And pour water in, just like I would for a fresh bouquet of flowers. Doesn't have to be all the way top, just enough for the stems, the roots to go inside. As you can see, mine still have the roots on them. And I'm going to now fit them inside that water. Okay, there we go. So throughout the week, as I use my green onions, whether it's in salad or to make omelets or slaws, whatever I'm using my green onions for, I can just pull them out and out of the fridge, take a few off, however many I need, just like this, put these back in and put them back in the fridge. Now, just like with my herbs, I actually like to use a plastic bag over the top of the green onions. Now, you can experiment. Maybe you don't need a plastic bag for your green onions, but I have found that I get the best results for food storage if I use a plastic bag over the top of my green onions. This is going to keep them from going limp and just going to keep them fresher for longer. Just like I did with the herbs, not the green onions, just like I did with the herbs, I'm going to secure that plastic bag to the top of my jar, And there we go. Now I can put my green onions and my herbs in the fridge and enjoy them for a week, even 2 weeks.